So, okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Xplained session today about MFA and FIDO. Let me first introduce myself. So my name is Wart Wuits. I am a Business Development Manager at Exclusive Networks, which I joined in 2016. And if you have any questions after this webinar, please give me a shout on my private and corporate email, which is shown in the slide. Today we are going to talk about MFA and FIDO, and we will start with a short introduction to MFA, then why you need MFA, how does it work, today's MFA threats, and of course FIDO. So let's start with a short introduction. So MFA is an extra layer of security that requires users to provide 2 or more forms of authentication to verify their identity. So MFA provides a higher level of security by adding additional authentication factors beyond just passwords and one-time passwords. And as you see in the image, you have two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. MFA is more secure because we use a third factor, like, for example, a fingerprint, face recognition, or a security token. So why do you need MFA? Because of increasing cyber threats and the need for stronger authentication methods. A single password today to protect your account is just not enough. And maybe you know this website, Have I Been Pwned? Here you can see if your credentials, like your username and like an email address or passwords, are already leaked. And I did the test with my own private credentials, and my email was already part of 5 breaches in the past. And the latest was in 2022 by Deezer. So my data was stolen and is now usable to hackers. And they can now launch a credential stuffing attack. So what is a credential stuffing attack? Well, it's an attack where hackers attempt to access an account by just trying out username and password. And these get sourced from credential leaks on various websites or hacker forums. Credential stuffing is one of the top threats against customer accounts. It's even outpacing legitimate login traffic in some countries. And your credentials are out there. As we see most recently, PayPal was breached and credentials were stolen. And in the past, big companies like Yahoo, PlayStation Network, and even Twitter were impacted. Twitter maintained that no passwords were stolen, but urged all users to use multi-factor authentication for their accounts. So what can we learn of this? You cannot stop a data breach, but you can make your password less useful to hackers by using MFA. Because even if someone gains access to your password, you might be protected. So how does MFA work? Well, there are 3 main categories used in MFA. There is the knowledge factor. This is what the user knows, like a password or a PIN code. We have the possession factor, what the user has, like a token, smart card, or maybe your mobile device. And there is the inherence factor, what the user is, a fingerprint, face, or voice recognition. And these 3 factors together are good for a verified login. Now let us have a closer look on the possession factor, which is something you have. And I will discuss some of the most used authentication methods today. Like you can receive a push notification on your smartphone to approve or deny authentication requests. I think this is the most familiar authentication method. And this can also be done via email and SMS when the user receives a verification code to authenticate his identity. You can even use your voice to authenticate in some situations. And next, there are also pattern-based authentications. Like we see here in the image, this is a grid token, where you have to remember a pattern from the grid. For example, if we see at the image, the last line is showing the numbers 32881. So if your pattern is the last line, you use these numbers to log in, and the next time the numbers will change, and you will have a new valid login code. And this one is also device independent, and I use this one myself because I'm used to change like mobile phone a lot in the year. so we don't have to re-enroll the token every time. Of course, there are also hardware tokens. These are physical tokens or smart cards that generate a unique code for authentication. And of course, there is FIDO, which I will explain later in this presentation, but this is passwordless. And of course, you can use your biometrics like fingerprint and facial recognition. So what are the advantages of MFA? Well, first, it provides an increased security. So MFA helps against cyber attacks such as phishing, brute force attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks, credential stuffing, and keylogging. And I will explain some of these attacks later in the presentation. Secondly, it reduces the impact of a leaked password. So password reuse and weak passwords today are still a thing. MFA allows the users to have a secure fallback mechanism to keep their data safe. It also addresses compliance regulations, because many regulations, such as the upcoming NIS2 directive, are pushing companies to implement MFA. Even today, companies like Salesforce are already enforcing their users to use MFA. And feel free to join us on our next Xplained session, which will be about the NIS2 directive and what it will mean to you. Next, MFA also improves usability. Instead of just typing in the login credentials, users can now authenticate by fingerprint or face recognition, which makes the login process much more easy. And it also reduces legal risks, because MFA reduces the risk to cyber attack and system downtimes, which is preventing breaches that might cause eventual lawsuits. And last but not least, I think it is the most inexpensive step towards a zero trust model. There are many MFA solutions available today that can just be integrated into existing systems, even in OT environments. And speaking of OT environments, do you remember this? All these cars waiting in line to fill up their tank? Well, this was actually due to a hack. The United States' largest pipeline, the Colonial pipeline, halted operations due to a ransomware attack. It carries 45% of the fuel used in the US East Coast. And if we take a closer look to this attack, we can see the hackers got in via by using stolen credentials. And this was done via a VPN service. They moved lateral until they found a device with admin privileges. Then a ransomware was released, and it infected all systems of the pipeline, and the pipeline went down. Well, this actually could have been prevented by deploying MFA firstly on the edge, like for example on this VPN service, and inside the OT IT environment to stop the hackers from hopping machines, moving laterally. So indeed, you never know actually when you become a target today, and even the MFA service itself is becoming a target. So let's discuss some MFA attacks. And the first one I want to address is MFA bombing. Well, these attacks are on the rise because they are really working. Last September, an 18-year-old hacker breached Uber. Not because the attacker found a way to bypass MFA, but because he just knew how it worked. Having already stolen the employee's username and password, the attacker wrote a script that automatically attempted to log into a Uber system. Knowing that each logon would generate a new alert on the user's smartphone, demanding that the logon will be approved or denied. And each time the user tapped deny, the script would try again, and spamming the target for more than 1 hour with notifications that became so annoying. By the time the attacker contacted the employee on WhatsApp, claiming to be a Uber technical support officer, the victim was ready to tap approve just to make it all go away. And once the logon was approved, of course, the attacker was able to retrieve admin credentials that provided access to Uber's critical system. And secondly, maybe and most known are phishing attacks, where attackers may attempt to trick users into revealing their MFA credentials, such as one-time passwords, token codes through email or websites or SMS messages. And then last but not least, we have the man-in-the-middle attacks. During this attack, a hacker intercepts and alters the communication between a user and the authentication system. For example, via a fake website. This can allow the hacker to capture and manipulate MFA, potentially gaining unauthorized access. And the user will just be redirected to the normal website and experience a normal valid login. So how can we defend us against these attacks and MFA threats? We can do this with FIDO. Now, what is FIDO? FIDO actually stands for Fast Identity Online, and it's created and backed by the biggest companies, and it is the answer to the password problem. So what is FIDO? Well, actually, it is an authentication standard based on public key cryptography. Users sign in with phishing-resistant credentials via an authenticator, and this can be a USB token or a smart card. And this can be used to replace password-only logins with secure and fast login experiences across websites and applications. And as the image shows, there are 3 important steps. So the first one is the device creates a private public key combination during registration. And this one is unique to the application or website you are registering on. Secondly, the public key is sent to the online service, and then the user approves the login with his private key. And I will explain this a little bit more in detail in the next slide. But let us first have a look on the old way of working with the password-only login, where indeed the user has a password on a mobile device. This device is in communication with the authentication server from the website or application. But with this way of working, authentication, we have some possible issues. The password can be stolen from the server. They can be stolen via a phishing attack. Even the user has too many passwords to remember. So, and today password resets are still one of the most created support cases. And users are not using difficult passwords as they are too hard to type on a mobile device. So weak passwords are made. And then there is modern authentication with FIDO, where the user has a FIDO token as an authenticator, where the private key is stored. A user gesture, like a gentle touch on the token, signs the challenge sent by the server. This is good for a valid login, as a private key and public key were linked on the moment of registration on this particular website or app. So there are actually no secrets or passwords saved on the server, which can be stolen. Authentication can't be tricked or phished. So yeah, that's really a good one. And there is no user friction, as there is nothing to remember. The users are just using a single gesture, and it's easy to use. So a small recap on the FIDO benefits. Well, it's strong security via asymmetric public key cryptography. So there is no plain text stored on the authentication server, and the user doesn't have to remember a password. And this, is also a possession-based authentication, because you first have to touch a token to approve a login, and this can't be imitated by a remote hacker. Anti-phishing, the keys generated are bound to a specific domain, like for example, when we use Office 365, and when the domain is fake, authentication will be denied. We will prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, because the key is stored in the FIDO device itself and will never leave the device. They are only used for signing the challenge sent by the website or application, and this process can't be tricked by a man-in-the-middle attack because he has no private key to sign with. And last but not least, it is very simple to use and set up. It's a single gesture. Your password can be removed. And of course, it's an open standard, so there is no infrastructure to deploy. And we have a call to action for you guys, actually. Get your free token and use it. In this slide shown before, there is a QR code, and then you will go to our website where you can request a free token. And last but not least, next week we have our expert session where we will have a more deep dive into FIDO and MFA. So please add the 20th of June in your agenda. You can still register via our website. And I hope that with this explained session, we now are one step closer to a totally trusted digital world. I wish to thank you for your attendance, and yeah, I will leave this slide on for a couple of minutes so you can all request a free token. And I wish to thank you.